Welcome to Life Stories. What do you do when the person you've given your heart to for 30 years finally turns his back on you? When the silence between you and the one you loved speaks louder than any argument ever could? Imagine a life where everything you did was for everyone else, and yet you were invisible. Imagine waking up one day, realizing you've spent decades not living for yourself, and finally deciding to take everything back. This is the story of a woman who's had enough of being ignored, enough of being invisible. The moment she decides to reclaim her life, everything changes. But the question remains, is it too late, or will her strength be the one thing that sets her free? Let's dive into her journey and see how everything unfolds. Caroline Moore stood in her kitchen, staring at the nearly empty bottle of wine in her hand. The evening had unfolded as it always did, quietly, with the hum of the refrigerator filling the silence. The dinner table was set, the candles flickering gently, but her husband, Ryan, hadn't even looked up from his phone when she placed the plates down. Her kids, Emily and Daniel, didn't notice either. Their voices blended into the background noise, their minds fixed on their devices, as if they were all in their own separate worlds. Caroline had been the only one left behind in the silence, invisible to everyone she loved. She had spent the last 30 years trying to create a home, trying to make sure everyone was happy, trying to make the people she cared about feel seen, while all the while, she felt herself slipping into the shadows. Ryan, the man who once held her hand in public, who used to surprise her with flowers on random afternoons, now barely remembered her birthday. He barely looked at her anymore. The woman he married was long gone in his eyes, replaced by someone he barely recognized. "Caroline, you're just not fun anymore," Ryan had said that night, his voice flat and uninterested, his eyes never leaving the screen of his phone. "I don't even know who you are." The words had cut through her like a cold wind. It wasn't the words themselves, but the emptiness behind them. No anger, no passion, just a weary indifference. The worst part was how her children didn't even react. Daniel, her son, laughed awkwardly, distracted by his sports highlights. Emily, her daughter, just raised an eyebrow, sipped her soda, and changed the subject to something trivial. They didn't see it. They didn't see her. Not really. That night, as she lay in bed, Ryan's soft snores beside her, Caroline stared at the ceiling, her mind spinning in circles. 30 years. She had given up her career, her dreams, her independence, to raise their children and support Ryan's ambitions. And what had she received in return? A house that felt more like a prison, a marriage that had turned into a contract, and children who only came to her when they needed something. She could feel the rot deep inside her, like a fruit that looked perfect on the outside but was hollow and decaying within. She had tried to justify it, told herself that Ryan was just stressed, that maybe she had changed too. But no matter how many excuses she made, she knew something was wrong. Something was broken. And the truth was, she was tired of pretending it wasn't. The next morning, Ryan had left early for a work meeting. She had caught a glimpse of the text on his phone before he walked out. A woman's name followed by a heart emoji. Caroline didn't confront him. Not yet. She had already known deep down that she was no longer the person Ryan cared for. But now she had proof. She began to watch closely, to pay attention to the little details. The unfamiliar perfume on his shirts, the late-night phone calls, the dinner receipts he never mentioned. The truth, it seemed, was hiding in plain sight. But it wasn't just Ryan. It was the children, too. Emily and Daniel were no different. They had grown up and moved on with their lives, only calling when they needed something: money, advice, or a shoulder to cry on. Not once had they asked how she was doing. Not once had they noticed the change in her. And that was when Caroline knew. She was invisible. One night after everyone had gone to bed, Caroline sat alone in the kitchen, sipping a glass of wine and flipping through an old photo album. There they were. Happy moments, birthdays, road trips, family vacations. But behind each photo she could see it. The moment things started to fade. The slow unraveling of everything she had worked so hard to build. It was in that moment that she made a decision. If no one would notice her pain, she would make sure they remembered her absence. Not with rage, not with fury, but with the quiet, methodical strength of someone who had nothing left to lose. The plan was set in motion. Caroline started to gather evidence, to track Ryan's movements, to document the lies he told. She wasn't doing this out of anger. She was doing it out of necessity. She had a right to know the truth, even if it was the last thing she wanted to confront. And when she finally found what she was looking for, the receipt for the boutique hotel in Mexico, the confirmation of a weekend getaway that wasn't for her, she didn't cry. She didn't scream. She just stared at it, feeling something harden inside her. Ryan had crossed a line, but this time he wouldn't get away with it. Have you ever felt invisible in your own life, like the world was moving on without you? How do you react when you finally realize that the people you love the most don't see you for who you really are? Caroline's quiet revolution had begun, and she would do whatever it took to reclaim her life. But would it be enough to restore her dignity, or would it all fall apart in the end? To find out, don't miss the next part of Caroline's journey, where she takes matters into her own hands in a way Ryan never saw coming. The silence in the house had become almost unbearable. It wasn't the absence of sound, but the way the air felt heavy, like a conversation unsaid, a tension hanging between every corner. Caroline had grown used to it by now. The quietude that was once filled with the voices of her family now seemed to have taken on a life of its own. But it wasn't just the silence of an empty house. It was the silence of a woman who had made a decision and who was no longer willing to stay hidden in the shadows of her own life. Ryan had left that morning for his business trip to Mexico, the one she had planned so carefully. She had driven him to the airport, kissed his cheek, and watched him walk away with a smile that felt like a victory. His phone buzzed in the passenger seat beside her as they drove, but she didn't look. She didn't need to. She knew everything now. The real twist came a few hours later, when she sat in the living room, sipping tea, feeling lighter than she had in years. The phone call came unexpectedly, the number unfamiliar, yet it felt like something she had been waiting for. She answered without hesitation. "Caroline?" The voice on the other end was familiar but strained. It was Greg, Ryan's old colleague. "I need to talk to you. It's important." Her heart skipped, but she didn't let it show. "What's going on, Greg?" "It's Ryan. There's something you don't know. Something you should have known long ago." She sat straighter, a chill creeping down her spine. The calm she had felt moments ago was replaced with a sharp edge of curiosity. "Spit it out, Greg." "He's been seeing someone else for years, Caroline. Not just the affair with Maya. It's been a pattern for a long time." Caroline's world seemed to halt. The tea she had been holding slipped from her hand, splashing onto the floor, unnoticed. She didn't need to ask who this woman was. Maya was just the beginning, the latest in a long line of betrayals. But the idea that Ryan had been living this double life for so long, that was something she couldn't have imagined. The silence between them stretched as she let the weight of his words sink in. A part of her felt numb. Another part, a darker, colder part, felt vindicated. "How long?" she whispered. "Since before you moved to Springfield," Greg said, his voice laced with regret. "I didn't want to be the one to tell you, but you deserve the truth." Caroline's mind raced. The house, the family, the life she had built, it had all been a lie, a carefully crafted illusion Ryan had woven around her. He had looked at her, had kissed her, and all the while there had been someone else, someone before, someone after. Her anger, which had been simmering beneath the surface, began to boil over. But it wasn't rage she felt. It was something far more dangerous. Clarity. "I think I've heard enough, Greg," she said quietly, her voice steady. She wasn't crying. She wasn't screaming. She was simply hearing the truth that had been kept from her for too long. "Caroline, you deserve to know," Greg insisted. "I know now," she replied, cutting him off. "But there's one thing I need from you, Greg. You tell Ryan, when he comes back, I'm gone." It was the final nail in the coffin. Caroline knew she had no need for a confrontation, no dramatic goodbyes. The power was in the silence, in the quiet space she was carving for herself. Later that evening, as she poured herself another glass of wine, Caroline found herself smiling for the first time in weeks. She had imagined this moment over and over, but never quite like this. It was peaceful, almost serene. She was free. But the next twist came when Emily showed up at the door the following afternoon. Her face was pale, her eyes wide with concern. "Mom, what's going on?" Emily asked, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. "Dad called me. He's saying you've kicked him out, that you've taken everything. What's happening?" Caroline stood in the doorway, her expression calm but distant. "I haven't kicked him out, Emily. He left on his own. He just doesn't know it yet." Emily's face faltered. "You're really doing this?" Caroline nodded, her gaze steady. "I am. I stayed for you and Daniel for so long, even when I knew I shouldn't. But now I see the truth. And it's time for me to go, to finally choose myself." There was a long pause before Emily spoke again, her voice softer. "I don't know if I can support this. I don't know if I can understand it." "Understand what, sweetie?" Caroline asked, her voice just above a whisper. "That I'm finally choosing my own happiness? That I'm no longer willing to live for everyone else?" Emily looked down, her jaw tight. "You deserve better, Mom, but I'm scared. What does this mean for us?" Caroline stepped forward, her hand resting gently on her daughter's arm. "It means that you will learn that it's okay to walk away when something no longer serves you. I hope one day you'll understand that it's better to be alone than to stay where you're invisible." Emily stared at her for a long moment, the weight of her mother's words sinking in. Then, without another word, she turned and left. Caroline watched her go, the ache in her chest, not from the pain of rejection, but from the realization that she had finally found the strength to be honest with herself. For so long, she had hidden behind the walls of her family, her marriage, her own fear of being alone. But that was over now. She walked to the front door, unlocking it and stepping outside. The cool breeze brushed against her skin, and for the first time in years, she felt alive. The quiet was no longer oppressive. It was empowering. And now, it was her silence, her strength. But what came next? What would Ryan say when he returned, broken and humiliated? Caroline had made her peace, but she wasn't done yet. The next steps were hers to take, and she wasn't going to wait for anyone else to tell her what to do. What would you do if you found out everything you thought you knew about your life was a lie? Do you think Caroline made the right choice by walking away, or should she have fought for her family? As the evening sun dipped below the horizon, Caroline knew she was standing at the edge of something new. But what came next would be even more unexpected than anything she had ever imagined. Would Ryan's return change everything? Or was this the beginning of her final chapter? Ryan's return was just as she had imagined it would be. Slow, hesitant, filled with that same arrogance that had so often made him believe he was untouchable. When Caroline opened the door, the man standing there was not the confident husband she had once known, but a broken, defeated figure. His shirt was wrinkled, his hair messier than usual, and the bags under his eyes spoke volumes of the sleepless nights he'd spent in some small, rundown hostel, stranded far from the life he had once taken for granted. "Caroline," he said, his voice thick with a mixture of shame and disbelief, "I didn't expect you to do this, to leave me like this." Caroline stood in the doorway, her arms crossed, her gaze steady. She didn't let her emotions show, but inside there was a whirlwind of feelings: anger, regret, and strangely, relief. For too long, she had let herself be invisible, a mere accessory in her own life. Now she was standing tall, looking at the man who had, for so many years, been the center of her world. And yet she realized she no longer recognized him. "You left me a long time ago, Ryan," Caroline said quietly, her voice carrying the weight of 30 years of silent sacrifice. "This isn't about the hotel or Maya or Columbia. It's about everything that led up to that. The dinners we didn't have, the moments I spent alone even when I wasn't. The years I wasted waiting for you to see me. I'm done waiting. His face flushed with a mixture of frustration and helplessness. I don't even know where to go from here. I don't have anyone else, Caroline. I've lost everything. She could see the desperation in his eyes, but she felt no sympathy. He had made his choices over and over again, and now he was facing the consequences. That's not my problem anymore, she replied, her voice soft but firm. You've had your chance, Ryan, and you chose to walk away from me long before I made the decision to leave. He looked as though the words had hit him harder than any physical blow. I'm sorry, he whispered, his shoulders sagging in defeat. Caroline nodded, her eyes softening for the briefest of moments. I know you are, but you're not the man I married anymore. And I'm not the woman who stayed behind hoping you'd change. I've become someone new, and for the first time in a long time, I'm proud of who I am. Ryan's eyes searched hers for some sign of the woman he once knew, but all he found was a stranger. Someone who had long since stopped being the wife who waited and began to be the woman who lived for herself. The silence between them was heavy with the truth, a truth he had never been ready to hear. I'm sorry for everything, he said again, his voice barely a whisper. Caroline closed the door slowly, but not without one final glance at the man who had once been her everything. He had never understood her, never truly seen her. Now all that was left between them was the finality of her decision. She had reclaimed her life. She had reclaimed herself. And nothing, not even his apologies, would change that. She took a deep breath, letting the stillness of the house wash over her. The air felt different now, lighter, as if the weight of years had finally been lifted from her shoulders. There was no anger left in her, no regret, just peace, the kind of peace she hadn't felt in decades. Later that day, as she sat on the back porch with a cup of tea in hand, her phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen, her heart skipping a beat when she saw the message from Emily. Mom, can we talk? Caroline stared at the words, a quiet smile forming on her lips. She knew that things had shifted, not just with Ryan, but with her children too. They had seen her strength, her courage, and maybe, just maybe, they would understand what she had done and why. She tapped out a response, her fingers steady as she typed. Of course, sweetie. Come over when you're ready. Emily arrived a few hours later, looking hesitant, as if she wasn't quite sure how to approach the conversation. She sat across from Caroline, her eyes searching her mother's face as if looking for something. An apology, an explanation, maybe even permission to feel the way she did. Mom, I don't know what to say, Emily said softly. I didn't expect you to be this strong, to do this. I mean, I knew Dad wasn't perfect, but I never realized how much he hurt you. Caroline took a deep breath, setting her cup down. You don't have to say anything, Emily. You don't have to understand right away. But I want you to know that I did what I did because I had to. For me, I stayed silent for so long, hoping things would get better, but they didn't. And now I'm finally choosing to live for myself. Tears welled up in Emily's eyes, and Caroline reached out, taking her daughter's hand in her own. It's not about being angry, sweetie. It's about finding my own happiness again. And that's something I want for you too. Don't ever lose yourself for anyone. Not for a man, not for anyone. Emily nodded, wiping her eyes. I'm proud of you, Mom. I think I always was, but I didn't see it. Not like this. I didn't know you could be this strong. I hope I can be like that too. Caroline smiled softly, feeling a warmth spread through her chest. You already are, sweetheart. That evening, as the sun set behind the trees, Caroline found herself sitting in the quiet of her new life. The house was no longer just a house. It was a place of healing, of new beginnings. She had a new name, a new path, and a future that was hers to shape. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in years, it felt like it was hers to walk. She didn't know what the future held, but she was ready for it. She had reclaimed her life, her identity, and in doing so, she had found something even more precious, her freedom. What do you think of Caroline's journey? Do you believe she made the right choice in walking away, or should she have fought harder for her family? If you enjoyed this story, please leave a 100 in the comments below. Where are you watching from? Share this video with your friends, and thank you for watching Life Stories.